Welcome to the Elikus podcast. This is class number 17 in the Maamor Naso Rosh, which is the fourth discourse in the great book B'Shosh Hekdimu 5672. And we are in the middle of chapter 14. We were holding in the middle of the longer parentheses over here. So the theme, just to catch you back up, the theme that we were discussing is a couple of days ago. We were learning about how the general theme we're developing over here is that he's trying to prove that the lights of the spheres, the lights of the attributes in Atzilus, in the world of emanation, the lights are not utterly simple with complete simplicity. They have a little slight design to them, very, very subtle, subtle. They're utterly, the subtlety of it is we can't overestimate how subtle it is, how unpronounced it is. So unpronounced, like we learned in the earlier chapter, that the lights can even flip over from one type to the other because they're so benign, they're so unexpressed, but yet they already have some kind of definition, and that's the reason why the vessels could grasp them. If the lights would be completely simple, which would mean they would be completely infinite, then the vessels would not be able to take hold of them. And we were also learning in this chapter, we're learning that when the lights come into the vessels, what happens? The vessel takes hold of the light and thickens the light, and the light itself becomes far more defined. In other words, the definitions that there are, let's say the chesed that there is, the kindness that there is in chesed, in kindness, and the gevura that there is in gevura, is not only attributed to the vessels, it's also to the lights. And when the lights go into the vessels impart the limitations and the definitions into the lights. And the reason the vessel is able to do that, because the light is already predisposed to this, because the light has already the potential of these definitions in the light. And that's why the vessels can just kind of actualize that potential. They bring it out. And therefore, when the lights are in the vessels, the lights become very different than when the energy is in the abstract. So particularly in this discourse, we're learning how that applies to the intellect. In the last discourse, in the last chapter, in chapter 13, we were primarily focusing on the emotions. And remember, we were going through a whole long discussion how when a teacher teaches a thought, and he has two different students, one is a very optimistic person like Hillel, and the other one is very pessimistic like Shammai, for example. One is very soft and kind, and the other is very strict. The same teaching can inspire Hillel to be super kind, and Shammai can take it to the complete different direction and see in that teaching reasons to be very strict, even though both Hillel and Shammai learned from the same teacher and they went to the same class. And that is because inside the intellectual idea that Shammai and Avtalyon, the teachers of Shammai and Hillel, taught, there is already leanings to chesed, to kindness. There are leanings to gevura. Shammai, with his incredible nose, to be able to smell out every potential for gevura, picks up on the light scent of gevura, of harshness that's in it, and brings it out. And when it goes into Shammai's vessel, since Shammai's soul comes from the world of gevura, it becomes very gevuradig, very, very disciplined and very judgmental. And when Hillel, because he has a super sense of smell, to be able to pick up every tiny tidbit of kindness, any potential of kindness or leniency or optimism, or whatever you want to look at it, Hillel picks it up and he accentuates it and highlights it and emboldens it when it comes into his vessel. That's the idea that how the emotions begin in the intellect in a very subtle state, and when they go into the kalim, in the vessels, they become more pronounced. But in this chapter, chapter 14, he's doing the same idea, but with intellect versus the energy that's preceding the intellect. So we learned that there is something called chachma stima, which is the chachma, the power of seichel, the power of intelligence, when it is still in keser, means when it's still above the kalim of chachma, when it's still above the vessels of the mind. And over there, we learned that when Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moses was confronted with with Hashem, when Hashem was operating from that level, and even though Hashem had a reason for what he was doing, but the reasoning, the level of the intelligence, the element of intelligence, when it is so super high, is so not discernible and detectable that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that because Moshe was operating from a level of Oires Bekalim, from lights and vessels. So he was using an intelligence once the intelligence is already within the Kalim, within the vessels. So in that level of intelligence, when Hashem, like the story we spoke about Rabbi Akiva, when Rabbi Akiva died in a way that he died, such a torturous death, and Moshe Rabbeinu was baffled by it, God told him, be quiet, so it arose in my thought. And as we discussed in the earlier classes, Hashem didn't say, so it arose in my will. That means there's no reason here. Hashem said, it's just my plain stubbornness. This is what I decided. And I'm God, I can do what I want. That's not what God said. God said, so it arose in my thought. Which means it is seichel. It's an intelligence. But it's a complete different type of an intelligence. We wouldn't even know it's intelligence. It's such a high level of intelligence. It's outside of the entire spectrum of not just human intelligence, of any intelligence. Intelligence that is within Kalim is already a defined intelligence. The power of intelligence that is pure the light of intelligence, and especially when it's in the source, in the soul itself, is so abstract and so subtle and so pure that in the world of where we process intelligence, it looks like plain stubborn, that there's no reason at all. But there is a reason. But it's completely outside of the sphere of our ability to have intelligence. Now, however, it is chachma. It's not chachma. It is already wisdom. And when that chachma will illuminate, will shine forth a ray, an illumination from the pre-chachma state, from that very essence of wisdom, if we might call it, when it will shine forth and it will illuminate from the pre-consciousness into the conscious mind, and then processed in our kalim, in our brain, what's going to happen? It's going to lower itself down, and it's going to become intelligence that we can, the way our intelligence works. It happens to be that the idea that Hashem was at that moment where Rabbi Akiva was the intelligence that dictated that Rabbi Akiva should die the way Rabbi Akiva died, although he didn't, on any way that our minds can grasp, he didn't deserve it, and that yet Hashem decided this should be, that particular element, the vessels of intelligence are not a vessel for it. So this energy remains in the pre-kalim state, and vessels can never translate that. But in general, when that level of pre-intelligence illuminates into the intelligence, it thickens and it becomes an intelligence that we can understand, or Moshe can understand, whoever can understand. But in our own soul, it works that way. That our chachma stima, well, if we would have an encounter with our own chachma stima, it wouldn't look like. If we would be able to be conscious of it, we wouldn't even know that it has anything to do with intelligence. It's just a pure energy. But it has notes of intelligence to it. Even more than that, it's the essence of intelligence. And when it will come down, and because it's intelligence, that's why when it goes into the vessel of intelligence, just like we spoke about kindness, that the vessel of kindness, thickens the kindness that's in the light and accentuates it, so too the vessels of intelligence make the subtleties of intelligence that's in the light come out and become far more an intelligence limited with the limitations and definitions of intelligence. That's what we were learning over here. However, so we're holding kamoikein. So let's go back a line so that it'll flow better where we're starting today. So is to when we measure up the supernal wisdom, the wisdom of Hashem's intelligence, Sfiras HaChachma, the attribute of Chachma, where God is being intelligent. But that's the lower level. where the intelligence is already in a keli, in a vessel, in the kelim of chachma, in atzilus. Like Gaba chachmas demar, if we compare it to chachma of keser, which is so much higher, ukemoisha shaydish makara chachma, and just like the root and the source of chachma, ime yoisei gamkein chachma, even though it is also chachma, the root of chachmas dima, the hidden chachma, is also wisdom. It's also chachma. But hareyu bepchines pshitus, it doesn't feel like chachma because it is pure pshitus. It is pure simple. Legabe chachma hagluya, in comparison to the revealed chachma. Ukemoi, and like in the example when Hashem tells the Moshe Rabbeinu, be silent. There is even though I am making sense, it's not a sense that you can that is sensical to you. It will never be. It's not because if you'll think about it longer, eventually you'll get to it. You'll never get to it because it's a different type. It's completely above the realm of where you're exploring. Ukamai, like it says, shtoik, Hashem said to him, be silent, kach Allah. So it arose in my mind. She'ein lezeh makim klal. It doesn't have any space at all. It doesn't fit at all b'chachma agluya, in revealed wisdom. It cannot be processed in that world. Hagamsha b'chachmas tema yesh al zeh tam. Although that in the chachmas tema, in the hidden chachma, it has a reason. For who? Mipnei shahatam v'chachma the chachmas tema, because reasoning and wisdom of chachmas tema, of the concealed chachma, Hilamaila is completely above mahatam, from the reasoning. Legabe lamaila mahatam feels and is experienced as completely beyond reason. Legabe chachma agluya, in the world, in the sphere of the revealed chachma, which means in the sphere of regular intelligence. So what we're really pointing out to is that our experience of all of our features of our soul, we experience it already in vessels. To experience pure energy outside of vessels is a very far experience from us. And if we do experience it, it feels completely different than, although it's the energy of every particular koach that we have, every particular power that we have, it's the essence of that energy, but the essence of that energy doesn't feel like that energy at all. I'll give you a poor example, but yet it's an example. And there's a reason, I thought of actually a reason why he doesn't give that example, but still it will help us understand that. Take a seed of an apple. A seed of an apple is the root of an apple, and it's the root of the entire apple tree. But you're going to chew on the seeds of the apple, although it's the essence of the entire, we might say, genetic code of the apple. You're going to chew on the apple. First of all, you're not going to see the colors of red. You're not going to see the colors of green. You're not going to feel the crunchiness of the apple. You're not going to feel the juice of the apple. You're not going to feel the taste of the apple. And yet, it's the essence of it. Because while it's in the seed, it's still so mufshat, it's still so removed from the actualization that later will come out when it expresses itself into full growth as it will develop, that in this state, although it's the essence of what will later be, it's on a complete different level. The reason, however, why I think the example is not a good example, because over here, at least, an apple seed, from an apple will never become an orange, and an orange won't become an apple. So which means the seed of an orange and the seed of an apple are kind of locked in, each one in their mode. So but here we're saying that the subtleties of, like when we spoke about chesed and gevura, the energy has the slightest inner notes of kindness, notes of gevura, but so subtle that the very same seed can produce the apple if it goes into Hillel's mind, and it can produce the orange when it goes into Shammai's mind. So that's over there. It's pretty different than the example that I'm giving. I'm just using the example in a limited scale, that you see this idea that things become manifest and they become actualized, they become revealed, and they become very different than where they are when they're in a source. And when it comes to seeds, for instance, the seeds, however, from an apple do look different than the seed. Every fruit has a different type of a seed. But if you take, for example, a tangerine and an orange seed, here you're dealing already with two seeds that look pretty much the same. They're not too different looking. Maybe the tangerine seeds are smaller, but they're pretty much the same. And yet they're two species that because they're close to each other, they look pretty much the same. But they're two. But you're getting from it that the essence of something is above and beyond the manifestation and the expression when it actualizes. Okay. Now, just like it is chachma stima, the concealed chachma, compared to the revealed chachma, which means, as we discussed, the concealed chachma is chachma that's part of Keser. The source, Keser, which is still the infinite light. The chachma in our soul, it means the pure soul prior to the features of the soul. But yet, the soul itself contains within itself all the kochos, all the powers. That's like the Keser, including within itself chachma and so on and so forth. That's called chachma stima, the concealed chachma. And then there is when each power goes into its vessel, that's called chachma giluya, the revealed chachma. But now he's going to say, the same concept also needs to be understood, not only regarding the source of the chachma in the keser and versus the chachma as it is in a manifest state, the revealed chachma, but also when you're measuring the difference between the oir of chachma and the keli of chachma. That means once the light of chachma actually illuminates from the pre-consciousness, when you have in a flash of light, the light emerges and it goes into the vessel, it goes into the container, and it's being already processed as our intelligence. Here too we can do with delicate surgery and differentiate between the energy and the vessel. And we have to respect the fact that the energy is defined, the vessels, the energies are abstract. And really, as he's going to explain now, the lights, definitely before they go into the vessel, they are much closer to their source where they come from than the vessels. In general, he's going to make a statement now like this. The light that emanates from the concealed chachma and goes into chachma hagluya and goes into the revealed chachma, goes literally into the brain. The light is the connector. The light is the radiance of chachma that comes forth. The question is, since it's the mediator between the pre-chachma and the chachma and the intelligence, what is it closer to? Is it closer to the origins, closer to the keli? Which one is it closer? In other words, is it more like the vessel, meaning as an intelligible chachma, or is it more like the source that is a completely abstract, simple energy? So he's going to say that the oir is closer to its own source, the chachma stima, than it is to the kelim, to the vessels. Definitely the light, before it goes into the keli, for sure. If you would experience pure illumination from your chachma stima, it's very, very edel, it's very, very abstract, it's very elegant, it's very undefined. For sure. But even after it goes into a keli, and the keli and the vessel imparts or brings forth the actual taste and the actual coloring and the actual experience of intelligence and so on and so forth. Yet, even then, even though the energy now has become, let's say we discussed, if you put water into a red glass, the water will become red. And remember we spoke that in a case where it's really going to become red, not like water that only appears to be red. That it really, while it becomes red, it will really become red. And the water that goes into a blue glass will, let's say it's actually going into the glass, not just staying inside the cup, surrounded by the glass, but it's going into the glass. And the dye that's in the glass is actually going into the water. But even then, since the moment this energy will go out, let's say it's released from the vessel and it will go out, inherently it will go back to being what it was before. Therefore, it's still, even after it's in the keli, it's still closer to the source than to the vessel. He's going to explain that idea. It's closer. Now the whole idea that I just mentioned, that it's possible that a light, once it's in a vessel and becomes colored already, can go out of the vessel and become uncolored. I'll remind you, this is what we discussed in chapter 13, when we spoke about Hillel and Shammai, that it's possible that even though they already made up their minds one way, if they go back into the classroom the next day and they'll return to their teacher and the teacher decides to teach it again, it's possible that Shammai and Hillel will exchange sides. And Shammai will suddenly hear the notes of chesed, although very unlikely, and Hillel will hear the notes of judgment. They'll exchange their attitudes, and Hillel, and like it says a lot of times in the Talmud, or sometimes, very few times, that Hillel was the strict one, and Shammai was the lenient one. According to in the Maamor, it says it's possible that will happen even after they've already made up their minds and kind of took it in their own direction. Hillel took it in his way, and Shammai took it in his way. But when they go back to their class and they go back with humility, which means they're willing to relinquish the idea completely and walk back into the class like a child who never ever studied anything and listen with a complete open mind, the second time, they might come back with opposite conclusions that they had before. And that's because the idea and essence can fluctuate this way and that way. And depending on the vessel, and the light, even after it was in the vessel, can return to its pshitas. So this is what he's saying over here, that because the light is so pashut, it's so simple, it's closer to the shoresh and the makar of the light than it is to the vessel. There's a greater separation between the vessels and the lights than there is between the lights and the shoresh of the light. Again, kamoy came. This is the point that we were holding over here. Kamoy came b'chinas ha'or the chachma, the light of chachma. Im heyois, even though shebehislapshusay bahakeli, when it goes into the keli, who begeder ha'chachma shel ha'keli, it becomes in the framework of intelligence of the vessel. Makol makom, nevertheless, be'etzem, in its essence, hu b'chinas belima. Remember we said that in all the Eser Spheros, all the 10 attributes, it says that they are called belima, even though we give them names, Chachma, Chesed, Teferes, we give it all the various names of the spheres, we say that be'etzem, the spheres are belima, without substance. So we explained that that's not referring to the vessels. The kelim do have a ma. The kelim are something. Vanilla is vanilla and chocolate is chocolate. Each one has its flavor. The vessels are defined. It's the energy that we say is belima, without a substance. But hold it, didn't we say it does have substance? Very subtle, yeah. But it's so abstract, so hidden, that you don't see any chesed, you don't see any gevura, you don't see any of these characteristics and traits in the light. And he says that's essential to the light. Because the light is coming from an infinite source that's beyond all definitions, that's why the light will always remain with the non-characteristic, with its non-characteristic character, which is a weird thing to say. But it will always remain with its non-characteristic character, and in essence, even though when it goes into a vessel, the vessel will vesselize it, so to speak, will keli it, and make it operate and perform and even become with the tainted like the vessel, but in essence it's not. That's what he's saying. In comparison to the keli. Why? Because the way the hasaga, the grasping of the light, as it is in its essence, what does that mean? Reflecting its source. Because again, what's the Oira Chachma? The Oira Chachma is like a light shining from the essential Chachma. Now, we know the light, there's a rule about light. Light is always Me'ein HaMa'or. Light always reveals the source. Light is not coming to produce anything new. Light is just to reveal the source from where it comes from. So it's always similar to the source. Since the source of Chachma is a non-definable Chachma, is a different type of chachma in essence. So therefore, the light that emanates from it also exhibits that character of the source. And what's the character of the source? That it doesn't have character, that it's pashut. So therefore the light in essence is also pashut and simple. As he says, as it is emanating from its shorish and its source. Hu b'pchinas pshitus is in a state of simplicity. It almost feels that it's not seichel. It feels, you can't even sense it as an intelligence, as we discussed earlier. Legabe inyana hasaga shelakeli. If you measure it up to real intelligence, to real hasaga, to real grasping, the way the vessel conceives and understands something, the pure oil, the light, is like above seichel. It's, even though it is seichel, it's like above seichel. Rak, only. Al yedei hakeli, through the vessel, nikneba hasagazu. The kizu. Through the vessel, it becomes embedded in it, that it becomes an intelligence, it becomes an energy of a knowable intelligence. An intelligence as we understand, a defined intelligence. Va'alkein, I'm skipping the parentheses, there's a tiny part we'll come back to in a minute. Va'alkein ha'or be'etzem, and therefore the light in its essence, hu b'pchinas pshitas legaba keli. That's why the light in its essence is in a state of pashut and simple in compared to the vessel. Shahakeli einoi be'erach ha'or. Because the vessel, because, here's the point, so this is the punchline, because the light is really similar to its source, which is utterly beyond kalim, the vessels. Therefore, we can say about oir and keli, light and keli. When we say light and keli, we mean the lights that go into the kalim. Yet we can still make a determination that the light and the vessels are shaloi be'erech, which means they are completely, they're not equal to each other whatsoever. They are so removed from each other. Umuvan, and he goes so far to say, the inyan be'ena roich tahakeli legaba or, that the differentiation that differentiates the vessel from the light. Which light? The light that goes into the vessel. The separation of the vessel from the light. That we say that the vessels are so inferior to the light is a much greater distance, as we were bringing out before, than the distance that there is between the light and its source. Hu harbe yoiser. It's much greater. It's much farther away. The vessels from its very own light is much farther away than the light is from its source. Hu harbe yoiser mehe'ein aroich the oira mislabish bahakeli, from the light that goes into the keli legabe sharsha mekoiroi, in comparison to its root and its source. Why? The oira mislabish, because the light that becomes enclosed had a mashuhu begeder inyan asagas hakeli. This, that the light, once it's enclosed in a vessel, becomes like the vessel. It's not because the light itself is so thick and dense. It only becomes that way because it's operating through a vessel. A good way of, let's go back to an example. I know we didn't speak about this today, but earlier we gave that example. It's like the difference between the way our neshama, before it came into a body, had intelligence, and the way our neshama has intelligence when it's in a body. What did we learn earlier? You can't even compare the two. Souls in heaven, when they have intelligence and they know things, their intelligence is completely spiritual. They see spirituality, understand spirituality. They don't understand even anything physical. Physicality doesn't even make any sense to them. They can speak of physicality like a scientific entity, but they have no reality of the physical because they're living in an abstract world. To them, spiritual energies is so tangible and real, and that's what they grasp. The very same soul, however, when it comes into a body, suddenly its entire modus of operation, its entire experience changes. It becomes thick. It's whenever it understands things, it's only understanding physicality in a real way. When it's studying anything spiritual or abstract, it can talk about it. It can give you the measurements and the specs like we discussed, but it doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know it. So what do you see from here? That the but the neshama, when the neshama is in a body, did the neshama become physical? No. But since it's operation, that means it's coming into consciousness. We're experiencing our soul through a filter of gray matter of our physical brain. So the physical brain is going to take that pure intelligence of the soul and thicken it into a physical experience. It's not going to be spiritual. Although in essence, it's always spiritual. Even while it's in our body, it's spiritual. But as it's translated through the neurons of our mind, of our brain, it loses touch with the spiritual realm and becomes a physical experience. But the soul, in essence, even when it's in the body, is still closer to heaven than it is to earth. It's operating through earth. It's not of earth, it's of heaven. It's operating in earth, through earth. So therefore, its effects, its powers are all translated into earthiness, into the material world. But in essence, it's still close. And the moment the soul goes out of the body, instantly it retracts to its spiritual state, because that's what it is in essence. So the same idea is when we're looking at the oil of our intelligence. Once it goes into a keli, it's the vessel that makes it be that way, not it in essence. And therefore, it's closer to its source. That's what he's saying over here. It's only because it's enclosement in the keli. In essence, the grasping of the light is like the understanding of its source, which is completely above any intelligence, even a spiritual intelligence, as we know, that is oiros bekelim, lights and vessels. It's abstract of abstract of abstract. However, but the difference between the vessel and the light, that's a real difference. The vessel is really limited, and the lights are not limited. So that's what he's saying, that the incomparability between the vessel to the light is much greater than the incomparability of the light that's in a vessel compared to the light initially. Because it's closer, it's not so far, meaning you can match it up easier. It's closer, it's more connected than that difference. It's a complete different type of asaga. They're b'muhus. In essence, it's two separate things. The muhus, the substance of intelligence that's not in vessels, that's the pure energy, is a complete different substance than the vessels, and even the vessels of chachma, but it's still a vessel of chachma, and it's a complete different substance, and therefore very, very, very far from and completely different than the elegance and refinement and abstraction of intelligence when it's not in a keli. Okay, so we're going to leave it from over here. I know this was deep, and it's going to get only deeper. But tomorrow, Bez Shem, in the next class, we're going to come back. We still have a little parentheses to fill up. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here right now today.